Hello. I accidentally, Wally, forgot to hit a button, so we're going to do this start over again.
Sounds good to me.
So we had some technical difficulties on my end too. But what I
Once
was
is
going to
good,
say,
twice is better.
better, yeah. What I was going to say is I got questions for you, and if anybody has any questions, now would be the time to ask you. Supreme Gecko is definitely, you know, the channel to be watching. He does everything from isopods to millipedes to geckos to maybe fish in the future here, which would be awesome to see. So, um, how is everybody out there doing today? I'll tell you who we got in here. I don't know if you could see everybody that's in here or not. We
I
got
don't have the chat up, but I'm going to jump on with my phone real quick here.
okay, yeah, we got Justin. My Animal House is in here. We got Pumpkin Patch. Blackbird's in here. Tanisha's in here. I want to say hello to everybody that's in here. Uh, RJ is in here. So yeah. So and
Hi,
Rose is in
everybody.
here. So yeah, I just Wally Kern. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do over there, Wally?
Oh,
Before we
gosh,
get
as little as I possibly can do. I make Nanette do all the work over here. I don't really do much of anything. I kind of. I put up a sales page and I get the money in, and then, I buy fancy hats like this.
yeah,
Actually, this is a hat from Andrew, and I thank you once again, my friend, for
yeah,
this
that's a great.
wonderful hat. I've developed a rash, though, right around the headband where this hat sits. So I'm going to have to probably change it over at some point in the show, to
Yeah.
my Blackhawks hat. Just joking. Um, so just real quick, I'll keep this as brief as I can, but I do a lot of geckos. My main passion in this hobby, in this reptile hobby, is geckos. So I do crested geckos, leopard geckos, gargoyle geckos, small geckos. I wanted to say big geckos, but I don't do big geckos. I don't do the Leachianus, the lychee geckos. I don't do the really big ones. I do leopard geckos. Crested geckos are my mainstay, but I like all those really, really weird geckos with funny names that nobody can pronounce and nobody wants to keep other than a weird person like myself. So a lot of little really weird geckos like that. But about 2 years ago, I swayed a little bit and got into isopods, and I just absolutely love keeping isopods. Um, Recently, I got into millipedes and have had some success with millipedes. So the whole invert kind of thing is really interesting to me. But I tend to fall back on geckos. We have years and years and years ago. I converted, and I've been doing this for about. But years ago, I converted our downstairs pretty much into a gecko facility. So we're running about, I think it's around 600 enclosures. Probably about 400 are filled right now, so I have a lot of space for babies when the babies come, and they've been coming, hot and heavy lately. Um, but we're all set for a lot of crested geckos, some gargoyles, and again, a lot of weird kind of geckos out there as well.
Yeah. Now with all these enclosures, right? How much time do you actually spend with the geckos, not including your isopods and your? I know you do mealworms, and I know you do like dubia roaches and stuff like that.
It kind of, I'll say it like this. It kind of goes back to my fish keeping days. I used to keep about 125 big tanks of fish, but I would say probably 75% of my time was taking care of the live foods, the brine shrimp and the white worms and the grindle worms and the daphnia and everything to feed the animals. Actually, keeping the fish was a lot less time. And back then, this is going back 25, 30 years ago, everything was through mail or booklets, nothing, obviously before the internet. So there wasn't a lot of, social media time devoted
Mhm.
back then. Now, I would say probably 50% of my time is in the facility, and that's cleaning and feeding, obviously, and maintenance. God, I hate doing maintenance. I hate fixing lights. I hate anything electrical. It just makes me feel like I'm taking away time from the geckos. But then probably 50% of my time is on Facebook and Instagram and answering questions, email, setting up our web page. So I would say total throughout the day, I'm a couple of years ago I retired. which is a lot of fun, and it sounds like a blast. And I watched the History Channel for about 2 weeks, and then went right back to geckos. Right now, I would say, Andrew, I'm probably downstairs or working on Facebook and social media probably 10 to 12 hours a day. But I think for a business like that, if for a small business, if you really want to do something with it, I think you really have to put the time in. So I
Yeah,
don't think that's unusual.
and no, and not only that, you're very passionate about it. If you weren't passionate about it, if it's something you don't like, don't, because you'll learn to hate it if it's something you don't like. If you,
Eh,
people get in this hobby thinking I'm just going to do this to make money, and if you don't really enjoy it, you'll learn to hate it. For very easily learn to hate it.
I've told this story so many times, but our very first reptile show that we did a long time ago, my oldest son accompanied me, and going in, he said, "How do you think we'll do?" I said, "Well, it's a small show. We only have about 30 or 40 animals. I don't really think we're going to do a lot, so don't get your hopes up." And we got into the show. I think we sold out. I think we sold all of our animals. We get back in the car. We're driving home. This was in Madison to Milwaukee, about an hour drive. We get into the car, and Christopher, my oldest son, how do you think we did? And he reaches in, he held the money. I made him do the accounting because I hate that too. So he reaches into his pocket and pulls out the wad of cash from selling all the geckos. And he looks at me like, "You don't know what you're talking about. You didn't think we'd do that well." And I said, "Okay, put the money away." And he puts it back in his pocket. I said, "Now, tell me how we did." And he said, "Well, I just pulled out a whole wad of money out of my pocket." I said, "Nope, that's not it. Tell me how we did." "We did good because we made a lot of money." "Nope, nope, that's not it." "I don't know. I don't get it." "We did good because we met a lot of people. We talked to a lot of people. We got people passionate about this hobby. We got our name, Supreme Gecko, out to people, and they'll hopefully, if our animals are healthy, if our animals are good, if we talk to enough people and got them interested, they'll come back to us." And that's the measure of success that I wanted to instill in Supreme Gecko, and I really, really wanted to instill in him, was that next show and the next show, and maybe a show a year from now, when that customer comes back and says, "Hey, I really love the animal. It's a part of our family. Now I want a second animal." That's where the success comes in.
Yeah,
That's how you measure success.
that's what I enjoy about the shows too. Is when you go to them, or if you're setting up to sell them, going between the people, meeting the other breeders, and associating with them, and that's what I
Yes.
find a lot of fun. Although I do enjoy hatching animals because I love watching them come out of the eggs and stuff. I really do. So does
Yes.
Becky. She'll sit there and, like, if she sees something like a little gecko starting to pop out when we had geckos, or a snake, she'll put the egg in her hand and watch it until it comes out, and then
Oh.
she likes to be the first one to greet it, I guess. I
Now, will
don't know.
she run into the facility and bump you out of the way, Andrew? Like, I'm going to be first?
Yes, when eggs are hatching, she definitely does it.
Good for her.
Or if like, when the geckos, if I pick a picture of the geckos, like one sticking its head out, she's like, "Shut the incubator, don't touch nothing. I'll be there in a minute," and she won't let me touch it. She gets all mad.
Excellent. Outstanding.
So yeah, sorry about that. I have to see make sure this wasn't
Oh,
Becky
yeah.
here texting me. My next question, you mind if we switch to isopods for a minute?
Whatever you want to do. I will talk all night if you want me to.
Okay. My question about the isopods is, what is the like? I know you started them like a couple years back, was it? About
Yeah,
a year.
about. Yep.
So since you started, where do you think the future of the isopods are going? Because I've noticed more and more and more people keeping the isopods, and with more and more people keeping them, and like, because they're pretty prolific sometimes.
Yes.
Uh, do you think the prices are going to go up or go down, or do you think they're going to become more and more mainstream in the hobby and stuff like that? And I'm going to add a lot to this question. I don't mean to, about the permit thing with the shipping and stuff like that and selling. Do you think that's going to affect anything, or?
From a popularity standpoint, from a supply and demand standpoint, I think that let's equate it the best way that I can do it, Andrew, and you know the ball python market a lot better than I do. But in the beginning, ball pythons very popular. It gained momentum. Morphs started to develop, and we're talking about one species here, ball pythons. and the hobby kind of took off and it grew and morphed and changed. And some people just wanted a pair. Some people just wanted a pair of normals, and they get their first babies and they're all excited. And now maybe I want something a little bit different. So some of these morphs started popping up, and then from there, we had triple hets and quadruple hets and all this other stuff. So the ball python market is still very, very strong,
Mm-hmm.
even though you could look on the isopod trading forums on Facebook and all over, and you see a lot of people keeping a lot of isopods, but they're still really popular. The same thing is with ball pythons. You walk into any show. Um, Around here in Milwaukee, the Tinley Park Chicago show is huge, absolutely huge. And if anybody gets a chance to go to that, walk in the door, and about every third or fourth or fifth table at least is ball pythons or something to do with ball pythons. It's a huge market down there. So it just, and I don't know how long people have been keeping ball pythons, but we've been keeping isopods for a very short amount of time. I think the
Mm-hmm.
market's going to continue to do that with different morphs. When a new morph comes out, Hoffman Segai, Persilio Hoffman Segai, the really big one, they're called the Titan. They're about 2 inches, a little bit bigger
Sure.
than two
That's
inches.
pretty big.
It's pretty big for an isopod.
Yeah.
And the first person that gets a yellow, they're a gray with some black stripes and some white fringe on their
Mm-hmm.
shells. Once somebody develops a yellow one, market's going to take off. Once somebody develops a red one, the market's going to. So it's going to be kind of similar. I think that though, there's always going to be a market for the powder blues or the
Mm-hmm.
powder orange or some of the other isopods, dwarf whites, more bioactive for that purpose. Dairy cows. There's always going to be a market for dairy cows and
They
some of
seem to
those
be
animals.
extremely popular dairy cows.
Extremely popular, and I think that they'll stay extremely popular because it's probably one of the best beginner isopods. But some of these morphs will just keep going and going and going, and a new one will come out, and then you'll combine a yellow with a blue, and it's just going to be nuts. I don't think the isopod market is going to fade anytime soon. If you ask me 5 years from now where it's going to be, I think it's probably going to be as strong as it is today. Maybe people won't be keeping some of the little gray ones that are pretty nondescript that breed just like little rabbits, like the Florida Fast or something like that. But in the meantime, I think that more people will be developing some of these other morphs, and that will take off. Now, from a permit standpoint, your second part of the question, I think that that's super important. I think a lot of people have their permits applied for and are going through that process. I think that what we have to realize though is that this is still a hobby, and people bring in isopods, and it's a living thing. It's the care that they're giving these animals is very, very important in their homes. But like anything else, the reason for the permits is so that we don't spread those isopods, in natural environments and contaminate, and potentially have issues from an environmental standpoint. In my mind, I don't see somebody going out to their yard and saying, okay, I'm done with these Hoffman Segai. I'm just going to dump them under a rock here and just leave them, and whatever happens, happens. I just don't see that happening. So,
Now, like where I live at, it's really cold in the winter. Some of them wouldn't last, would they?
that's exactly true. They just wouldn't last. Now, they do. We're in Wisconsin, and every spring I wait for those first few, really, really nice warming days and go out and overturn rocks and see what I can find, overturn logs, see what I can find. But so they do burrow down, they do hibernate. I don't know if they hibernate in the frost country that you live in. I mean, that's extreme.
I've seen little gray ones outside when I flip
See?
them,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I don't know what species it was. I'm just saying I've seen them out there, but I don't. Some of them subtropical ones I don't think would make it though.
Never, never ever. So there's a lot coming out of Thailand. There's a lot coming out of South America. They're coming from all over the place, in from caves. So if we drop them into our front yard and hope that they, even in hot weather, I just don't think that they would make it. So
Hello.
not to say that somebody should avoid being legal, because it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying that In my mind, this is a
All
hobby.
right,
I just don't see us,
bye.
contaminating the environment.
Sorry about that. That was the
No,
wife. Um, so one thing that I think that attracts me to them is there's so many different varieties and colors, and you don't need a whole lot of space for isopods. And they seem to be like the ones I had. They seem to be pretty easy as long as you take care of them within their guidelines, which isn't really hard to do. You'll do pretty good with them.
that's exactly true. That's exactly true. So I started, I said that I started a couple of years ago, but I actually started about 5 or 6 years ago. I kept dwarf whites from a bioactive standpoint, from a cleanup crew. And a lot of people start off that way with a dwarf white or a powder blue or something like that to help clean up their enclosures that they're keeping their geckos or skinks or even snakes in to kind of clean up some of the waste in that enclosure. Not that that's the sole means of cleaning everything up, but I started about 5 or 6 years ago, and I've told this story many times, but I remember going to a show and this guy had like 20 or 25 different species, and I said, Charles, I don't get it. I don't get the popularity of this. I don't understand. I can go out to my yard, I can overturn a log and find these roly-poly pill bugs. I don't get the attraction. I said, "Oh, Wally, you're going to see it. You're going to see it, and you're going to see all kinds of colors and shapes and sizes and patterns." But Charles, I'm not paying $5 for a roly-poly. And so he sold me a $5, container of dwarf whites or powder blues or whatever. And then I kind of got out of the hobby and I got back in, and my geckos were being conditioned, and it was the fall and nothing was breeding. So I wanted to get into something that I could get some immediate success with, and that was isopods. I got 4 or 5 cultures, and all of a sudden I had baby isopods. So I bought more, and then I had more babies, and those isopods held me over for that winter while all of my geckos were brumating, or at least cooling down, until the spring, and then I could get some eggs and then wait another couple of months to get some babies. So I had that little gap to fill, and isopods just immediately filled that a couple of years ago. But if you would have asked me 5 or 6 years ago, I wouldn't have even guessed paying $5 for an isopod. How about 30 or $50 an isopod when you need like 10 or 12 to start a good culture? Now you're spending some pretty big bucks for a little container of these little teeny tiny animals.
Yeah, I know.
Crazy.
Dylan asked, "What's the largest land-dwelling isopod? Do you know what it is?"
Well, I know the Titans, the Porcellia Hoffman Sega, in my mind, are the biggest that I have. I don't know if there's a different type, that's 18 feet long and man-eating, and I don't know.
They got some pretty big ones in the ocean. I've seen some big ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what does your wife think of all the isopods?
And I was joking before that I really don't do anything, and Annette does all the work. But I'll be very honest. When a lot of times when I go down to feed the isopods, and if I do something downstairs, I can take an hour job, like feeding the leopard gecko room.
Hmm.
I can take an hour job and easily make it 3 or 4 hours. When Annette does an hour job, she does an hour job, and she does it in 45 minutes. So, she'll help me occasionally with the isopods. Occasionally, probably every single time. She's sitting here, so I have to be kind of watching my words.
Yeah, see a
Um,
hand fly off the screen, right, me?
yeah, not this mic getting knocked over, the book
Yeah.
throwing. So when Nanette helps me, we go through it pretty quick. I think she loves working with these animals, and she likes to overturn, the piece of cork and see babies. She doesn't get as excited as I do when the Bolivari that I bought 12 of for, $200 turns into two, and I'm not going to get any babies. And then all of a sudden I see babies. That's major excitement for me.
Yeah.
But for her, I think it's just lifting them up and seeing the baby scatter. I think that's pretty cool for her too.
See, Becky doesn't have a problem with like the reptiles or something, but she has a problem with like isopods. They kind of, because they're so small and they scatter real quick sometimes, she kind of gets a little freaked out.
Yes. I
But
did a video on Florida Fast, and I pulled up a piece of cork bark about this big, and I pulled it up, and they just and there were hundreds and hundreds on this cork bark, and they scattered within probably 2 seconds, and the cork bark was clear. So if you can imagine that in your mind, it looked exactly like little miniature cockroaches.
That's what runs in her head. Cause
Yeah, I don't blame her.
so, what what's the biggest mistake people do that start with isopods? Like, what do you think the biggest mistake that a new keeper makes when they start buying isopods?
Buy more. Um, I think and I say that
That makes
half
sense,
joking.
but
I
it's the
say that
truth.
half joking, and I tell you, Andrew, I was very cautious, and I built up my collection only after I took on an isopod type, and there's many different types,
Hmm.
but I took on an isopod type, and I got some babies, and I could reproduce and get a second generation. Then I felt like I was experienced enough with that type of isopod to maybe get two or three of the same genus or similar species. Um, I say that half joking because it is an addiction. If you have one, then
Oh,
you have to have two, and if you have
I,
two, you have to have four, and all of a sudden, you have a whole rack of 30 tubs of isopods. It's easy
I
to
know. I've seen
do.
your videos.
Yeah, it gets to be an obsession, and I just like all the different behaviors and different colors and everything. But I think what I'm trying to say there is I think that people want to jump before they walk, and I really think that you really need to understand. Get two or three of the basics. Get some dairy cows. Get some, granulatum. Get some uh, uh, armadillidium peach. Get a couple of different types. Figure out which ones you really like, and maybe delve into them after 2 or 3 months of successfully keeping them. I can get into a lot of one of the biggest mistakes with an enclosure is keeping it too wet or not enough ventilation. But every species is a little bit different. I really think, though, that the biggest mistake people are making is that they want one or two, they have some dairy cow babies, and now I have 12 different cultures. And I'm
Yeah.
not, and I'm trying to keep them all exactly the same, where some of them are a little bit different.
So now the species that you just mentioned, would they be the species that you would recommend for beginners then?
I have a video on my YouTube channel that goes through I think my top 5 beginner isopods. Dairy cows are absolutely in there. I think peach are in there. There's a couple of other isopods that are in there, but the one that I would suggest for everybody to start with, and it's so easy, maybe not for you because everything's frozen right now, but I think the number one beginner isopod, is whatever you can find in the wild. Go out and grab yourself a scoop of dirt, fill up a 6 quart, get a couple of pieces of little wood, get some of the leaves from that area, grab a dozen or two of the isopods, throw them in this little container, and give it a shot for a couple of weeks and see if you like it. See if you can manage it. See if you have questions. Find some groups. Find some people that can answer some questions for you. Try it for a month, and if you don't like it, you don't like it. But if you do like it, then you have some experience behind you to maybe jump into, dairy cows or powder blues or something like that.
I know that a while back the big thing was the rubber ducky. Everybody
Oh,
liked the rubber ducky.
yes.
They're very expensive. At least they were. I don't know what they are now, but I know they were.
They're still, excuse me, they're still up there. They're still about 10 to 15 to $20 a piece. And again, you have to have at least, you really should start with, 8 or 10 to start off with.
Yeah.
They're still up there because they're so unique, and I think the hobby gravitates to something so absolutely they are a beautiful, beautiful
Hmm.
isopod. Are they my favorite this I might be stealing your question here. Are they my
No.
are they my favorite isopod? I wouldn't even put them in the top 10 of my favorites.
So what is your favorite then?
My favorite is probably Hoffman Segai because they're so huge. And I'll tell you real quick why I love them so much. The very first time that I had these, I got them from Ryan McVeigh from Madison Area Herpetological Society, and he gave me about 12 or so. And within like a month, he gave me some pretty big ones. Within a month, I had babies. So everybody with that time, a couple of years ago, was saying, "Oh, this is one of the harder ones," and I had babies, and I felt, here we go. I know my stuff. Um, it gave me kind of that boost a little bit in my ego and all. But um, they're not super hard if you do a couple of things the right way with them. But the big thing with Hoffman Segai is that when they have broods, I think that's the term for mankai, the little babies. When they have broods, you can lift up a cork bark, and mom Hoffman Segai will guard the babies, and
Didn't you
dad
have
or
you had that on a video once, didn't you?
I did.
Yes, I
So
remember that now.
so they kind of huddle around their babies, and their babies huddle around, and their antenna go out and feel for their babies and kind of bring them in. And if another isopod, another Hoffman Segai come by them, this is my house. You better watch what you're doing here. And they, battle a little bit, head to head butting, and so they're actually showing I think a lot of behavior, a lot of parental care behavior. So I guess if I were to say my two favorites would be Hoffman Segai and Perseo bolivari, which is a big yellow, big yellow isopod, really super cool looking, very I think very difficult and but just super nice looking.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're an awesome. I wouldn't mind diving into it a little more than I've been into them, but uh, that's definitely in the future somewhere. When I get my office set up next door, I can put what I want in it. So that one. Now, with millipedes, how many species of millipedes do you keep?
Um, I think I'm keeping only about six different species, six or seven. Um, I'd have to go through them in my mind, but probably about six or seven. And none of the really super fancy ones. So I have the bumblebees and the scarlets and the ivories and smoky oak. And recently I picked up some flame legs,
Mm.
and a couple of other velvets and maybe a couple more different species.
Do you have any of the giant ones or no?
I don't. So again, when you talk about the isopod hobby, you'll talk to somebody that's really, getting into the hobby, and they'll talk
Mm.
about dairy cows and they'll talk about powder blues. But the question that they ask a keeper right away is, "Do you have any of those rubber duckies?" It's the same thing with millipedes. No, it doesn't matter what you're keeping. Ultimately, somebody will ask, "Do you have the Gygus, the Africans, the ones that are?" I'm going to go off the screen here, but the
The,
ones that are about a foot and a half long, and literally they fill up your hand and your forearm. They're amazing animals. I don't have any because they're still very expensive. A couple $100. It's hard to get a male and a female. Um, they're illegal to import, so you have to find somebody that has them and they're getting babies. They take a long time to grow. They develop, and I don't know if this is good or bad. I need to learn more about this, but they develop mites, and you have to kind of watch that. It might be beneficial mites. I'm just not sure. But there's a lot of reasons why I don't have them yet.
I know when we had the pet store, we used to have what they used to call giant millipedes in there, and they were pretty big.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the same species you're talking about or not, but they would be about 6, 7 inches long, and really about I think it's a quarter maybe. They were huge.
Yeah. It sounds like the same thing.
You had to wash your hands after touching them though, because I know lemurs will lick those because they're from Madagascar and
Ah,
they're a little psychedelic there. So I, I don't know. So you just had some. I seen you just had some baby millipedes on your one video.
yes.
How well did that turn out? Because I know you said you had like 30 of them, separated them, and then there were still a bunch inside there. And
Oh,
so, how many did you have? How many pair adults did you have, and how many babies did you get from that? If you don't mind me
this
asking.
is really this is a good example that sometimes it's way better to be lucky than to be good and knowledgeable and experienced. And I was lucky. So it was about a year, maybe the springtime. And I got three of these flame legs, and their legs are orange and red,
Hmm.
and their bodies are a deep reddish, black, and they're just a beautiful millipede, and they're slow moving and very majestic, and they're just fun to watch. So I got three of them just out of luck from a pet store in the area, and brought them in knowing that 3 isn't really a good match for trying to get babies. And a lot of people haven't gotten babies working with these animals for a long, long time. It's
Mm.
not super easy. A little bit of the environment has to be right, the substrate, and so on and so forth. So I got them in, had 3 within like a month and a half. One of them found the screening of the tank. I use kind of a chiffon screening, and it had
Mm.
found that screening and had burrowed through the screening, and I found it a couple of weeks later on the floor, it all dried up and everything. So now I'm down to 2. So the odds of having a male and female are just nothing at all. And so I didn't have much hope and started putting out inquiries to get more in. Nobody has them, nobody has them. Talked to the original
Yeah.
source, nobody has them. So now it's the fall. I have no hope because they really don't live a long time. A couple of years is a good lifespan of these animals.
Hmm.
So went in and I do my weekly maintenance and feeding and more leaves and checking the health of the animals. And sure enough, I pull up the cork bark and literally there's little teeny tiny infestated worm kind of things all over the tank. And you do something like that and you look and it's like, oh my gosh, what got into the? And then you realize, oh, well, I think this is babies. So you start doing a little digging. So I let them go for a couple of weeks. You don't really want to bother. You don't want to dig up millipedes because they could molt. You're not really doing them a good service if you're messing around with them too much. So I picked up, like you said, about 30 or so off the surface just to put them in another container. I didn't know if mom and dad would mistake them or run over them or what. I just wanted 30 or so just in another container. And the next time I went in, it looked like I hadn't even touched the container. So
Wow.
I'm thinking there might be 120 or I don't know. There's over 100.
Phew.
Absolutely. So you go from 3 to 2, no hope for any babies. And for me in my facility, the ultimate indicator that I'm doing something the right way is to get babies. But this wasn't me at all. This was just absolutely pure luck to come up with 2 that were male and female, and then have some babies. So, and you
Are
got to
they
thank the lucky stars sometimes.
are they easy to determine the sex on them, the adults, or no?
Some are and some aren't. I
Okay.
don't think these have a definitive. I think it's the 8th segment of their bodies might be separated a little bit. The legs might be a little bit different. Little hooks on the male's legs.
Oh.
Once I got down to 2, it really, and because I couldn't get any more, it really didn't matter too much. I had pretty much considered them one of our pets at that
Now,
point.
now you said you were down to 2 and you had like 120 babies in there. How many times can they reproduce in a year? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea. I really should know more about this animal, but what I'm doing is I've isolated those other 30. I'll let a bunch go with their adults until they're a good size and start looking like they're adults, and then I'll start pulling them out as well and set them up in new enclosures, um, and we'll see how many pairs that I can get out of this
Yeah.
group. Hopefully.
6 months from now, you'll have 1,000.
They're cool. This is an animal that really has that wow factor, I think.
Um, Now with geckos, what is your favorite gecko? I know you have to have a favorite gecko. I know you said you don't keep the giant like the um, Leachianus or anything. And why is that you don't keep the Leachianus? I mean, you've told me, but I don't think the people here know why you don't keep Leachianus.
At this point, it's more just me being stubborn than anything else. And I'll go back to another. I have all these old stories because I'm just so old and I've been in the hobby for so long. But when I first started keeping crusteds, and again, I go back to my oldest son who helped me in the hobby. Dad, we have to get Leachianus. Oh my gosh, this is going to be a hot topic. And I looked at it and said, well, I'm kind of busy with the crusteds and the leopards and some other animals. I just don't have time. And I made the comment I wish I would have never made now. And I made the comment that Leachianus is going to grow to a certain point in the next couple of years. Then everybody that wants them will have them, and the price is going to drop like a rock. So,
That didn't
and
happen.
we've seen that in the hobby, right? We've
Yeah.
seen
Oh, with everything.
yeah, yeah. So, In the last 15 years, the price has gone from 200 or 300 to 1,000, 2,000. It's not uncommon if you're getting a purebred Leachianus to pay $2,000 or $3,000 for
Oh,
one
I know.
animal. So every time we go to a show, every time my son sees a Leachianus, he just does one of those. Yeah, you really know what you're talking
Talking
about,
about it.
Dad.
Yeah, see.
So the reason I didn't really want to keep the Leachianus in the beginning was that, in my mind, and this is a big animal. Again, it sits on your forearm and is easily 10, 11, 12 inches long. To me, they're just a big pile of poop. They're big brown poop geckos. They don't have I don't think, and again, I shouldn't be saying this because I've never owned one, but I've been around, hundreds and hundreds, but they just don't have a lot of personality. They're not very active. Until you get them into a breeding situation where you have the male and female and talking
I was gonna say they're
and
very vocal.
they're very vocal. So they are a cool animal on that regards. But from a color standpoint, if you know me, you know that I really like, some colors a little more than other colors. So I look for those colors in my animals. I
No,
love reds.
it's
I love oranges.
hey, it's understandable. The reason I don't keep them, one is the price, because
Yeah.
I could take what I would spend on one of those and buy 10 of something else. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
That's the way I think.
That's me.
But I have friends that have Leachianus, and let me tell you, you get Leachianus, it's even a small one before it's even. They will projectile poo like a straight shot, and it won't be just a little bit. It'll be like you'll be like, where'd all that come from? I mean, and they wait till you pick it up so they can shoot it at you.
So if you could
Oh,
get a good aim, maybe that's a reason to keep them.
I
Have
could.
friends and family over, and that's
Well,
some good entertainment right there on
and
a
I'm
Thanksgiving.
that's what I. Yeah, I've had some of my friends. I mean, you would think that somebody took a glass of something and splashed it on them when they were holding them, and it was like, where'd all that come from? And they're like, well, they have to grow out of doing that, and some do and some don't.
Yes.
So I don't know. It's not. I don't want to be holding that. That would ruin it for me with Becky if she got squirted in the face or something. It'd be the end of it.
Maybe Becky needs to order some of these and have some of them as kind of a preemptive strike kind of situation.
Nanette's sitting there. She's probably thinking it too. She's probably like,
Yeah, Leachianus, Google
yeah,
search.
yeah. Now they're getting into people want pure locales too. They don't like it when you mix them. So there's a lot in with the Leachianus. It's kind of
So that was my big mistake. What I didn't realize, and I really did think when I mentioned that to Christopher years and years ago, that the Leachianus market would keep going up a little bit and then start coming down and never really make the peak like it obviously has now. The thing that I lost track of and I didn't consider was just the rarities of some of these pure locations and some of the you get a pure location, you can say this is a pure location and then start developing some of the pinks and some of the whites, and
yes,
they are very impressive with those colors. But if you have a purebred, you have a purebred, and like any other animal, a purebred is something special. So
yeah.
that's where I missed the boat on this whole thing.
Right. Well, and then if you get bit by one, it won't be a bite you forget.
No,
That's for sure.
no.
They got a vicious bite. Not that there's anything wrong with them. I'm not saying anything bad about them because they're pretty cool. I
Yeah.
will admit they're cool animals. But now out of the geckos, I've noticed from watching your channel over the years, you used to do a lot of leopard geckos, which you did a video as to why you slowed down on leopard geckos, and you used to do a lot of crested geckos, and I think you still do a lot of crested geckos, but now you're getting into the micros and like the real small ones, or and like that are smaller, I guess you could say.
Yes.
I mean, you get an egg, you could put two eggs in a little bottle cap.
These, I like the small animals, and I think that the reason for that is that they just have such unique behavior. I can get a bunch of small enclosures all in one shelf or one rack and have a dozen different animals excuse me, and just see so many different behaviors. One of my favorite animals is, and I finally got some back in our collection, one of my favorite animals is a Phelsuma clemeri. And everybody watching this live stream, not right now, but afterwards, Phelsuma clemeri. And if you can go to the YouTube channels and look at this animal, they're small. They're only about 2.5 to 3 inches long. It's a Phelsuma like the giant day geckos that everybody's familiar with in the gecko world. Big green
Hmm.
day geckos. Dernier, they're out during the day, but these Phelsuma are like little hummingbirds. So if you get a 6 or 8 in a decent sized enclosure, they chase each other. They'll come up on a ledge and sit there and then bob their heads, and another one come up and they'll go back and forth. And this one will tag that one and he'll be off. And then another one, it's just like watching hummingbirds at a feeder, just that interaction and positioning, and I think body communication. You can read all of that by watching a small group of these animals. And they're beautiful. They're little jewels, blues and turquoise, and just fantastic.
They're,
Phelsuma clemeri.
now they're not hard to keep though, right? I mean, they're not like complicated, are they? Or do they have specific things that are different? See, I notice a lot of people get into geckos, and then when they get a whole bunch of different kinds, they don't realize that some of them need different care, which kind of limits your ability to get them if you only have one room because you got to keep specific
Three things
guidelines.
with, yep, absolutely. This animal has three different requirements. One is that you have to have a small, not a small cage, but a closed cage. You can't have any holes in a cage with these animals because they are quick and they're smart. They'll look for holes and they'll get out if you do have any gaps, any openings. So that's number one. Number two, they need UVB light. They have to have UVB, and I'll throw in there a 2.5 requirement, and then that you have to miss it. But a lot of geckos need that. So a tight enclosure, you have to have UVB. You have to miss them. And number three requirement is that they are 2 to 2.5 inches small. Their babies are small. So if you have a small gecko, that means that you have to have small food. You
Mm.
have to have a constant. And if you think about hummingbirds, if you've ever watched a feeder, you'll see a hummingbird come in, they'll feed, they're off, and 5 minutes later, that same hummingbird will come back to that same feeder and eat again.
Hmm.
The reason why? High metabolism. So same thing
Hmm.
with these Phelsuma clemeri. Super high metabolism. They're always dancing around. You have to feed them if not every day, every other day, and you have to have the right size food for them. So if you miss on one of those, you can maybe miss on one, but you can't miss on two. Absolutely can't.
Mm. Yeah, see. Now you were talking like the Pictus. You like the Pictus, and
Yeah.
you kind of pointed me in that direction, and I think they're pretty cool. I like it when they're eating. If they get their tail going. Some
Yes.
of them get their tail going. It's pretty cool. You guys got to check out his channel. I got some really good videos on there.
I
Now,
love the Pictus, and the reason I like them so much is just real quick is because they're like a leopard gecko with the morphs and the colors and the patterns from a genetic standpoint, but they're half the size of a leopard gecko. You can keep them easily in a 15 quart, and I think they have a whole lot more personality than a leopard gecko. I call them the little prairie dogs of the gecko world because they're always, up on the highest thing that they can find, and they're always looking around to see what's going on.
so what temperatures would you keep those at then? I mean,
Um, Pictus I keep at room temperature, so that could vary, from an ambient temperature of like 72 to 73, 74, 75-ish.
mhm.
But you always have to have a warm spot, so if you have an enclosure that's, a 15 quarts, you want at least 25% of that to be about 90, 92, 94 degrees.
So, but where do you, okay, now talking about the geckos in general, not just the Pictus, but where do you see the hobby going in with with geckos in general?
Uh, it's really hard to say. So, I took a break in this hobby about 4 or 5 years ago. I think I kind of mentioned that a little bit.
Hmm.
And at that time, it was hard. It was really hard to find very exotic geckos like Australian geckos or Eurodactyloides or this gecko or that cat geckos or satanic geckos. It was Europlatus, very uncommon in the hobby. And if you had them, you were kind of one of maybe 4 or 5 people that had them. Now I'm seeing more and more people keep animals like that because more and more people are changing their mindsets, and I have to say I'm slow to get on board with this, but I'm getting better in some ways. But I think more and more people are keeping them the European way of keeping animals, and that's instead of keeping 20 animals in 20 enclosures in a space, really small space, now they're keeping maybe one or two in that same space and giving them bioactive enclosures, the right substrate, live plants, the right way to open up an enclosure instead of from the top, from the front, misting systems or misting all the time. They're giving these animals that need UVB the right UVB. So I think the hobby is advancing that way where keepers are understanding that some of these animals have requirements, and those requirements have to be met, and they're giving them those requirements and moving forward with some of these rarer animals. And I think and I hope that the hobby continues with that. And I think people are kind of putting the money thing aside
Hmm.
and saying, I want these animals to be as healthy as I possibly can, and the money will come. It's just, keeping them as healthy as I possibly can, no matter what.
I think people who are starting to keep them correctly, and they're getting healthier young offspring from them because the
Yes.
parents are healthier.
Yes.
And I think that they're finding that they're able to sell them at a little higher price because you're getting a much healthier animal. And if you follow what the breeder, well, most breeders anyway, or at least get some information on it, you'll be successful. And I think the days of a lot of people buying like hundreds of them just to have them is
Yes.
changing. I think more and more people are buying them and setting up smaller groups with bigger, better enclosures with, like you were just talking, like more of a natural looking enclosure instead of tubs. I noticed a lot of people are moving from the tubs to more naturalistic looking enclosures.
Absolutely. Now, I'm slow to again, I'm slow to get on board. I just set up a whole new rack system, but
Mm-hmm.
this year I did set up Exoterra rack with bioactive enclosures and doing it the right way. It's hard for me because I still do want to do a lot of small geckos,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm slowly getting to that point. So I'll turn the tables a little bit on you, Andrew, and I'll ask
Sure.
you the same thing with snakes. Do you see the same trend with snakes where people are keeping them healthier, bigger
But
enclosures?
here's what I've seen. Now, I notice a lot of people still keep them in racks. I keep them in racks. Most people do keep them in racks, but I've noticed some of the European people that I associate with and talk to, they're making their rack tubs bioactive tubs themselves. Like they're putting like dirt and stuff in the bottom, and they're putting the isopods in there, and they're putting like the springtails in there to try and leaf litter inside the rack tubs themselves. Because a lot of people have turned around and you spend a lot of money on a rack, and you want to keep these animals as natural as possible. It's a lot of money to go around and buy a bunch of enclosures to do that with. Now I notice a lot of like people who have like the green tree pythons and stuff like that. They'll do that more so than somebody who does ball pythons or colubrids and stuff like that. But I've noticed in Europe that they've started using the tubs and making them more bioactive tubs.
I go back years and years ago, back again to the fish hobby. Everything that I do with the geckos and the isopods, I feel like 90% of what I do relates back to when I kept fish. And going back 20, 25 years ago, again, we in the States, we had to have 125 tanks and as small as we can get, some of these big fish in, while, in Germany, people were keeping apistogrammas, not in 10 gallons, not in 20 gallons, but in these 55s or
Mm-hmm.
100-gallon. And it was planted like, oh my gosh, this looks like I'm down one of the Rio Negro tributaries, and it looks so real in the plants. And there it is. There's a pair of pistos down, but I've got to zoom. I've got to look really close to find those animals. Just completely different from the U.S. But I think that we're making that hopefully we're making
That
that
switch
step
switch.
forward.
I've noticed that with the fish hobby myself. Like even with discus fish, over here people keep them in a plain 20-gallon tank, two of them, a male and a female with some breeding cones in there. But you go over to Europe and they have like the branches. They have branches in there that make it look like an actual cutout of the river.
Yes.
For the like the discus fish and stuff. It's pretty interesting to see. But now like there's a guy out there named Andrew Stensky, the same as my name. He's from Texas, and he's big in the aquarium hobby. You guys need to go check out his Facebook page and stuff. And he's got setups that you wouldn't believe that people are setting up, and it's all natural looking now. And it's when you look at his tanks, it's like actually like you went down in the river or the lake and just took a looking right at it. It's really that's what I like about that hobby.
And the fish look more natural. You
Hmm.
see the discus like you were talking about with the roots and everything, and the discus kind of swimming in between the roots, and
Hmm.
yeah, that's cool.
So fish. I know you like fish. You started out in fish. I had you on the podcast a long time ago, and that was the big thing we talked about with fish because you
Yeah,
really, really, really enjoy your fish.
I do.
Uh, now, are you getting back into fish?
I don't know.
I seen your Facebook page and your Instagram, and you had some. Now, at first, I thought they were breeding cones. I don't know if they are breeding cones, but they could be used as breeding cones. But then I thought, well, maybe they're for catfish, uh, like a plecostomus or cory cat little caves.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I can neither confirm nor deny the fact that I would love to start keeping some of the fish that I truly truly love to keep back, going back 25 years ago. So I used to keep Tropheus and Fronto, and some of these names, I apologize for some of the viewers might not recognize some of these names, but big Lake Tanganyikan African cichlids.
Hmm.
Um, I like the Lamprologus, the Lalupi, the big yellow, beautiful yellow animals. I like the South American Pistogrammas. I liked pencil fish. I used to keep a lot of killifish. I used
Hmm.
to keep discus. I just can't do that anymore. I can't do that with as many enclosures that we have to maintain downstairs. I can't do that. So if I were to get into fish, it would probably be a small setup, and it probably would be a lot of smaller tanks, so that I could keep a handful of like killifish or pencilfish or small Coreodorus
Do you know
and
what?
certainly a pistos.
Do you know what I like about killifish?
What's
You
that?
can order a bunch of eggs, and they'll come to you in a little jar of dirt,
Exactly.
and you can take the dirt, pour water in, it, and if they come out, as they, you know, they're pretty cool. Killifish. I was just amazed when I first found out about killifish many years ago, and there's a guy in one of these islands down here that he imports to the United States, and you can order killifish from him, and they come in a box. They're not no water, no nothing. You're like everybody. And when I first saw that, I was like, "What do you mean?" And it was just eggs inside of a little. They keep them in their drawers, and they pull them out and ship them to you.
Quick story. I used to be obviously into fish, and a friend of mine, I went to a killifish show, and we used to go together all the time to these auctions, killifish auctions. And killifish usually run about 20, used to run about 20 bucks, 25, 30, 50 bucks. 50 bucks for a pair of killifish was a lot. So he couldn't make one of the shows. He said, "Well, you get those. Get me this." And he wrote it down. There's going to be one bag. I know the person that's got them. He won't sell them to me. He wants them going into the auction. Whatever it costs, get them for me. "Yeah, are you sure, Steve?" "Yes, I want them. I want them. I want them. I don't care what the cost." 25, 30, 34, 50 bucks. I don't know. $75, 80, 80, 85. He wants them. He told me whatever, $85. Well, he's going to shoot me. He's not going to pay for these. I'm going to wind up with it. And it wasn't killifish in a bag. It was eggs. It was like you were saying, dried peat with about a dozen eggs in it.
Hmm.
Who's going to pay $100 for 12, 10 or 12 eggs? $100. A couple days later, Steve comes over. "Hey, did you get those for me?" Because it's for email and social media. "Did you get those for me?" "Yes, I did. Here's your vial." "Cool. How much did it cost?" $100. "I'm
Oh,
really, really sorry. If it's
a
too
little
much,
bit.
I'll pay for them. I'll keep them." "Oh, I was going to go 200. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing with the killifish. They were crazy. So,
So many
right.
colors and varieties. Yeah.
All
I'm
right.
kind of, if I do get back into fish, I'll definitely keep a couple pairs of killifish.
Yeah, killifish are pretty cool,
Yeah.
and they come in so many colors. They got a lot of
Yes.
colors, and a lot of things. But like when we had the pet store, we used to get fish that you can't even get no more. And things have changed so much in the last 40 years. We used to have snakeheads in there. We used to have
Oh.
these little electric catfish in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I used to. We had hired somebody to work there, and he's sitting there, and I had everybody watching. They knew what I was going to do because the guy was watching. I said, "Look, when you scoop up one of these fish, it didn't say electric catfish. It had I can't remember what their name was on it. I'm like, when you scoop it up and you get it in the net, you have to grab it or it's going to jump out." And he's like, "Okay, no problem." So then I had somebody come in and to say, I want that fish. He walked over, he scoops them up, and he got about three of them. And he goes, "I'll take all three of them." And the guy had them all in there. And the guy had him scooped up, and he grabbed it. And then he's like, "Oh!" It was so funny. Not that it would, kill you or nothing. It was just the shock of the whole thing. It was crazy.
So
But
you
it was
all you had everybody just kind of watching this guy grab them and get shocked.
shock. Yeah.
I don't even know you anymore.
It
I
was
can't
funny, though.
believe you did that.
Yeah, that was funny. That was funny stuff. So, yeah. My one of my last questions I got for you for the night. Wow, was
Excuse
that
me.
going to be a two-part question? Is where do you see you in your hobbies in about 5 years? And when you do decide to step back out of it, do you have somebody in mind that you want to have take over your? I, I see you got your granddaughter in here a lot. That's why I'm asking. Well, maybe your granddaughter would want to take over everything as you step back. Not that you step out completely, but someday
Yeah.
you might want to. And
It that's a great question. So 5 years from now, Andrew, excuse me, I need to kind of plan for the future and everything. I'm retired. I have plenty of time right now, but maybe in 4 or 5 years I won't have the same ambitions. I might not have the same passion. I might not have the ability to keep as many enclosures that I do. But in my mind still I'm working Excel spreadsheets and my to-do list, and I'm still planning out. I talked to my wife tonight. I bought some more geckos, and I said this is not a gecko that we're going to bring in here and breed next year and sell the babies next year. This is a gecko that we're going to bring in, hope that we breed next year, get some babies, build up our collection, and probably in 3 years start selling the babies. But I want enough of these that I can set them up and have enough babies to provide, other animals to other people. Kind of a little bit of a rare gecko. But anyways, in my mind, I'm still thinking 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line. I think everybody that wants to get into any reptile or any business can't think about this year. They have to think about this year and 2 and 5 years down the line and where they want to be, where they want to take their hobby, where they want to take their business. As far as me, and eventually, if I start finding that I want to thin down a little bit, I have 3 sons. My oldest son is getting married in a couple of weeks, and his mind's way over here. The other two, my middle son kind of helped me with some shows, but he never really developed that interest for the animals. Christopher, the oldest, certainly had a love for the animals.
Mhm.
Middle son, he was more from a business end. Youngest son, not a care in the world about animals. Loves animals, but not the animals that I'm keeping. I think that the tradition will be passed down potentially in some way down to my granddaughter Crystal. I've got to tell the real quick story today. I went
Mhm.
downstairs. She's doing school. They're doing their reading, and they know when they're done with reading, they can have a break and get some snacks and things like that, and maybe go on their Kindle or watch a little bit of TV. I'm I knew that it would be about a 45-minute break for me. I went downstairs. I'm putting away babies. I'm doing something. She comes down. Can I look at the geckos? Sure, you can look at the geckos. And she's looking at the geckos. She walks over to the scoop, a little metal scoop that I use to clean tanks with, scoop up the sand and the poop and then throw out the poop. And she opens the tank and she's talking to me about the isopods. And she's got the tank open and she knows the animals in there enough that she knows they won't climb. And here
Mhm.
she's scooping poop and talking to me and throwing it in the
There you go.
garbage without even thinking that she's cleaning gecko poop. Um, so I think, if nothing else, hopefully, this exposure has helped her share some of my love, some of my passion for nature and the animals that we're keeping. I certainly know that she has a passion for the isopods because
Mm.
I think half of the isopods now are hers, theoretically. And certainly the millipedes, she loves holding the millipedes, and you've got to have Becky watch the video of her holding the millipedes, and to convince Becky that she can start holding millipedes as well.
Yeah.
She loves the geckos. She looks for babies. She puts away the babies, baby crested geckos. So I'll get a box of eggs. I'll open it up, and there'll be a baby. And right away, she's running over to the container. She's writing down the number and the lay date and the hatch date, and she's getting paper towel and the decorations. And she grabs the baby. She puts the baby in. And then she goes into the container and she gets the egg and all the gook on the egg. I can see her kind of wincing a little bit. Are you okay, Crystal? Yeah, I'm okay. It's just an egg.
Yeah.
And she goes
There
and
you go.
throws the egg. She's 8 and she's already doing stuff like that. So if anybody's going to take part of this or all of it over, I hope, someday maybe it's Crystal.
And that's great because you're getting them into it young, and they seem to enjoy it, and I think that's great.
Yes.
One other thing I want to talk about is your 12 days of Supreme, your 12 Supreme days of Christmas. You need to give yourself a plug for that because that is the greatest giveaway that I've ever seen on anything ever. I love that. I participate every year you have it.
Well, thank you very much for bringing it up, and thank you for, I'm going to try to keep this short, Andrew. We try to do this every single year. We had a little bit of a break there. This is our 8th time of doing it. So the very first year that we did it, I contributed, some gift certificates and some gecko dishes and a hide and a bag of supplies and a bag of, Repashy food or whatever. For the whole thing added up to maybe a couple of $100, which as a giveaway. And we do 12 different gifts, and lately it's been way more than 12. But anyways, I tried to string it out every other day, giving away a gift. And again, that was all email, my site, a little bit of Facebook. This is our 8th year. The last year that we did it, we gave away, and it's not about the numbers. It's not about money. But the only way I can measure the success of this is not just the participation and the comments that I get back, but from a financial standpoint, we gave away $3,500 worth of gifts last year. So this year, I'm hoping that we can match that, get it back on its feet after a couple of years of absence. I've just started the donation letters, and I'm already up to about 1,500, and I don't have a couple of the bigger donors coming in. We're going to have anything from Exoterra tanks to $100 gift certificates. You say that, and I'm looking right now at 2 $100 gift certificates from Josh's Frogs of all places.
That's awesome.
It's amazing, and I hope that and I do a lot of promotion to the vendors, and I make it fun so that the participants to win a gift I'm just not selecting a name, and that's fine if it's a random. But what I try to do is share this information. What's your favorite video that I did last year? I tried to get some interaction from the people that are entering this so that we kind of build this community. But I think that we're getting a lot of response from the breeders and vendors more because it is such a passion of mine to do this and to give back to the community. And I know that they see that, and I know they want to be a part of this, and I tell you, I can't tell you how many times, hey, Mike, can you give something? What do you need? Not, well, let me check, and what do you need? And it's all coming together so well. I think this is going to be a huge, huge year for gifts, but again, I think it's going to be a lot of fun because I'm going to incorporate YouTube videos into this and social media, and I want to promote the video. I want to promote the vendors with some really super nice YouTube videos too.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's been a long time now. I can't remember what year it was that you were doing it, and I won the 3rd day. I was so excited. I was like, I can't believe it.
It's a thrill, and I think a lot of people have that impression too, that if they can win something. So the last year that we did it, it's 12 days. It starts after Thanksgiving and runs all the way to Christmas, every other day, so that we give a gift and we announce for the next gift, and people have to do something. But the last time we ran this, I think we had at least 2 gifts every day, and several days where we had 3 or 4 gifts.
Yes.
It's
Yeah. This is,
crazy. It's so much fun.
and then you can find us on a Facebook group. You got a Facebook group for it, right?
12 Supreme Days of Christmas. I'm going to start pushing out some videos in the next couple of weeks, so watch it. And again, it starts just after Thanksgiving, so
Hmm.
stay tuned. Visit my page, Wally Kern. Visit the Supreme Gecko Facebook page. I'll have Instagram pictures, and of course the Supreme Gecko YouTube channel. But most importantly, go to the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas Facebook page, and that's where all the announcements will be.
Yeah, and it's a great giveaway, and I like it. It's a lot of fun. So, and check out his channel too. I love your YouTube channel. Like I tell everybody, it is absolutely my favorite channel. I've been watching it for since you started, and then you disappeared for a while, and I was like, "What happened to Wally Kern?" But now you're back again, so I'm happy. So I'm good.
I'm back.
So I just want to thank you for coming on here. It was great to have you here. I'm going to thank your wife for giving you away for an hour or whatever to come on here. So, but I have to get going because I got some things I got to do, and I'm sure you're a busy man yourself. And thank you. It was great to have you
Andrew, it's always my pleasure. You're such a down to earth person, and I think we get along so well because we have so many of the same types of values. I mean, this is a great, great community,
on.
but I
Yes.
love being on a part of your chats. I wish I could, spend more time on your chats. You've got a great audience. Your fans are behind you 100%, and that's how you know that you've got something really, really good going. So, congratulations with that. Thank you
No,
very
thank
much.
you.
It's an honor for me to be on your channel.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for being in here. And thank you guys all for being in here. What's the name man here? Michigan Exotics asked a question. He wanted to know when you're going to have some rubber duckies and some crystal. What is it? Curbis. I guess that's how you pronounce it. Species ambers available, or how do you say
Ambers
that?
and the rubber duckies,
Yes,
the Cubaris ambers
Cubaris.
and the rubber duckies. What I'd like to do is kind of build my collections, and if you notice, I don't do a video until I start getting mankai, some babies out of
Mm-hmm.
a collection. I try to make sure that I'm providing the right information, and the only way that I can know that I'm doing something right is to start getting babies. So the duckies have some babies. There's little guys floating around there, but I'm not having, hundreds and hundreds of babies. I have probably a group of 12 or 13, 14 babies in my rubber duckies. So anybody that gets into, I'm going to take a lot of your time here, more time, and I apologize, but
That's fine.
anybody that's getting into these rubber duckies or the giant Spanish isopods, the really, really tough ones, don't go out and get 12 and then expect in 3 months to be able to sell your rubber duckies for $20 a piece. When I bought my rubber duckies back in the early 2020, back in January, February, I knew that this would be a 3-year process. The first year, just getting some babies. Second year, building up the collection. The third year, separating them and having my sustainable collection and a sellable collection. So January 2020, I didn't expect to start selling until 2023. And if you don't have that mindset, you're going to run into a situation where you have a sellable item like the rubber duckies, you're going to sell them all, and then your original collection is going to die, and then you're going to have 3 rubber duckies, and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to start over. So if you're getting into this, think kind of long term with animals like that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But thank you for
I
the
know.
question.
I know what that's like with the planning way ahead, and if you're
Yes.
not planning ahead, then you can make mistakes. You'll be
Yes.
like, wow, you know. But again, Wally, thank you for being on here. We'll have to do this again someday.
My pleasure.
It was great to have everybody in here, and I will talk to everybody later. Peace out. See ya.